Maria Dawson lived on a quiet ranch far away from busy towns and noisy streets. Her ranch sat in a wide-open area of the American West, where the sky looked bigger, the air smelled fresh, and the land felt endless. People who passed through the area often wondered how she lived alone in such a peaceful but lonely place. But for Maria, the ranch was not just land. It was her world, her responsibility, and the only home she truly loved. Maria had grown up there. She knew every corner of the property, every old fence post, every tree, and every horse that had lived on the ranch since she was a child. Her father, Samuel Dawson, once served as a trainer for the U.S. Cavalry many years ago. When he retired, he settled on this land and taught Maria the values he believed were most important: discipline, courage, respect for animals, and strength of character. He raised her with the same habits he taught soldiers: waking up early, caring for the horses with patience, staying physically active, and never giving up when life became difficult. Because of this upbringing, Maria became a strong, calm, confident woman. She was not loud or proud. Instead, she carried herself with quiet strength. People who met her always noticed something unusual about her. She did not look intimidating, but she had a certain sharpness in her eyes that showed she was not someone who could be easily pushed around. Her everyday life was simple, but she lived it with purpose. Each morning, she woke up before the sun rose. She would step outside as the cold morning air greeted her face, and she would walk toward the stables to feed her horses. She had 4 horses, each with a different personality. Storm was strong and fast. Willow was gentle and calm. Ranger was older, but wise and steady. And Luna was the youngest, full of energy and curiosity. Maria treated them like family. She brushed their coats, checked their hooves, and spoke to them softly, as if they understood every word she said. After caring for the horses, Maria usually rode across the open fields to check the fences or the water lines. She loved the feeling of the wind brushing against her face and the sound of hooves hitting the ground. Riding made her feel free. It reminded her of the days when her father trained her, teaching her how to sit properly in the saddle, how to control her breathing, and how to understand a horse's movements. Her father used to say, "A horse will follow you only if you respect it. Trust goes both ways." Maria never forgot those words. Even though the ranch was peaceful, Maria had begun to notice small things that made her uneasy. A few times, she saw tire tracks where no vehicle should be. Once, she found a broken fence that looked like someone had intentionally stepped on it. Another morning, she saw an unfamiliar truck parked far away near the edge of her property. When she rode closer, the truck quickly drove off. She could not understand why strangers would come so close to her land. But she tried not to jump to conclusions. Still, her instincts, sharpened through years of training with her father, told her that something was wrong. She started paying closer attention. She checked the borders of her property more carefully during her morning rides. She made sure to keep the gates locked and the horses secure. She even repaired some of the older fences to make sure they were strong again. Maria did not want trouble, but she was not afraid of it either. She simply preferred to handle things quietly, with patience and calmness. One evening, as the sun was setting, Maria sat on the porch drinking warm tea. The sky was painted with shades of orange, red, and purple. It was one of those evenings where everything felt peaceful. The horses rested in the stables, the wind gently moved the grass, and the world seemed calm. Maria felt thankful for moments like that. She felt safe and connected to the land she loved. But even in that calm moment, she could not ignore the uneasy feeling inside her. She remembered her father's advice. Quiet moments are important, but never stop paying attention to the world around you. She kept that advice close to her heart. Later that night, Maria heard the distant sound of an engine. It was faint, but she recognized it. It was the same sound she had heard near her property lines before. She stood up and walked to the porch again. The night was dark, but the moon gave off a soft, silver light. She looked across the open land and listened carefully. The sound faded after a few seconds. Maria stayed alert for a while, watching the horizon. She was not scared. She was steady and calm. However, she knew something was moving closer to her life. Something she could not yet see clearly. The next morning, she prepared for her ride as usual. She saddled Storm, her strongest horse, because she planned to check the far side of the ranch. As they rode toward the western border, she noticed fresh footprints near the fence. There were also marks left by heavy boots, and the remains of cigarette ash on the ground. Maria did not smoke, and none of her neighbors smoked near her land. These signs made her more certain that strangers had been walking around her property. Storm sensed her uneasiness and moved slower than usual. Maria gently patted his neck and whispered, "It's all right, boy." She examined the tracks carefully. Her father had taught her how to read the ground the same way soldiers read maps. She could tell that at least 2 people had been there, maybe more. They were probably searching for something or checking the land. Maria did not want to jump to assumptions. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they were trespassing without harmful intentions. But the cigarette ash bothered her. It was a sign of carelessness, something people usually left behind when they had no respect for the place they were walking on. As Maria rode back toward the ranch house, she thought about what she should do next. She could call the local authorities, but she had no clear evidence of wrongdoing. She could also talk to her neighbors, but the nearest one lived many miles away. She decided she would stay observant and protect her land as best as she could. A few days passed. Maria continued her routine, trying to focus on her ranch work. Still, the feeling of being watched did not leave her. When she worked outside, she sometimes felt as if unseen eyes were on her. When she went into town to buy supplies, she felt that a dark-colored truck followed her for a short distance. She could not be sure, but she trusted her instincts. Maria was a calm woman, but she was not naive. She understood that someone might be planning something. Yet she also believed that facing challenges with fear only made them stronger. So she held herself steady. On one particular evening, Maria locked up the stables and walked toward her house. The sky was cloudy, and the wind felt different, colder, sharper. She paused for a moment, feeling a strange heaviness in the air. It was the kind of feeling her father used to describe as the calm before the storm. Maria looked across the land one more time before going inside. She loved her ranch deeply, and she knew she would do anything to protect it. She did not yet know what challenges were coming her way. She did not know how close danger was. She did not know that her quiet life was about to change completely. But she did know one thing. Her father had trained her well, and if someone tried to take away what was hers, they would discover that she was not the kind of woman who would stand aside and let it happen. She was stronger than she looked, stronger than anyone expected, and soon, the world around her would find out just how strong she really was. Maria woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in her heart. She tried to continue her routine as normally as possible, feeding the horses and checking the water supply. Everything looked fine on the surface, yet something inside her was uneasy. She tried to shake off the feeling by focusing on her work, but her instincts kept warning her that something was not right. She remembered the fresh footprints she had seen the day before and the cigarette ash near the fence. These were not things she could easily ignore. Later that day, Maria rode into town to buy grains and medicine for the horses. The sun was bright, and the road stretched long and quiet in front of her truck. She tried to remind herself that maybe she was overthinking. Maybe the strangers she saw were simply passing through. But even as she tried to calm her thoughts, she noticed something that made her heart beat faster. The same dark-colored truck she had seen earlier in the week appeared again. It kept a steady distance behind her. When she slowed down, it slowed as well. When she sped up, it matched her pace. Maria did not panic. She simply turned onto a different road, the one that led to a friend's farm. As soon as she changed direction, the truck continued straight and disappeared down the main road. This confirmed what she feared. Someone was paying attention to her movements. Once she reached town, she completed her errands quietly. She greeted a few familiar faces, smiled politely, and paid for her supplies. But her mind was somewhere else. Every sound felt louder. Every stranger felt suspicious. and every shadow made her shoulders tense. She did not like living with such feelings, but she knew she had to stay alert. As she drove back home, she repeated her father's teachings in her head, the ones he had told her when she was younger. Stay aware. Stay calm. A strong mind makes strong decisions. She took a deep breath and decided that she would prepare herself for anything. Whatever was happening, she would face it with patience and courage. The sun began to set by the time she reached her ranch. The sky slowly changed to soft orange and pink tones as she unloaded her supplies. Willow, the calmest of her horses, nudged her gently as if sensing her worry. Maria stroked Willow's head and whispered, "I'm okay. Don't worry." The simple comfort from the horse eased her heart a little. After finishing her chores, she sat on her porch again with a warm drink. The evening breeze carried a coolness that felt refreshing. From where she sat, she could see far across the land. Everything looked calm, but she knew looks could be deceiving. She tried to enjoy the stillness, but her mind remained sharp and alert. Just as she began to relax, she heard a faint rustling sound somewhere near the stables. Maria's eyes narrowed. She stood up slowly, careful not to make noise. She walked toward the sound step by step, her boots sinking softly into the dirt. When she reached the stables, she saw nothing out of place. She checked the locks, the doors, and the horses. Everything seemed normal, but she knew the sound was real. That night, she had trouble sleeping. She kept waking up to small noises, the wind, the distant call of an animal, or the faint movement of branches. Normally, these sounds were peaceful. But that night, they felt different. They felt like warnings. Maria slept lightly, her mind half awake. Every few hours, she stepped out onto the porch with a lantern, scanning the land. Apart from the quiet rustling of the wind, nothing seemed out of order. Still, she trusted her instincts, and soon, she would understand why those instincts were right. 2 days later, the trouble she sensed finally arrived. It started in the late afternoon. Maria was mending a broken fence near the eastern side of her property when she heard the sound of engines approaching. Not one engine, several. She stood up straight, wiping the dirt off her hands, and looked toward the road. 3 trucks rolled slowly toward her ranch. They stopped a few hundred feet away, dust rising in the air behind them. 4 men stepped out. They looked around the ranch as if they already owned it. One of them, taller than the rest, walked ahead with a confident, almost careless stride. Maria could see from their expressions that they were not coming for a friendly visit. She took a deep breath and walked forward to meet them. She didn't rush. She moved calmly, every step steady and firm. She remembered her father's lessons. Never panic. Never show fear. The tall man gave her a quick, almost disrespectful smile. "Evening," he said, trying to sound casual. Maria kept her voice calm. "Can I help you?" The man glanced at the land around them. "Nice ranch you have here. A lot of open space." Maria stayed quiet, waiting for him to explain himself. "We've been looking at land in this area," he continued, "and yours sits right where we need to expand our operations." Maria folded her arms. "This ranch is not for sale." Another man stepped forward. "We can make it worth your time." "I'm not interested," Maria replied firmly. The tall man's smile faded slightly. "You might want to reconsider. There's activity coming to this region. Big activity. It's easier if everyone cooperates." Maria understood the meaning behind his words. She also understood that these men were not honest businessmen. She had no interest in hearing more. "This is my land," she said firmly. "Please leave." The tall man stared at her for a long moment. Something cold passed between his eyes and the expression he wore. Then he smirked, as if her refusal amused him. "We'll talk again," he said. "Think carefully before our next visit." Without waiting for her reply, the men returned to their trucks and drove off, dust rising behind them. Maria watched until they disappeared. Only after they were gone did she let out a breath she had been holding. She knew now that the threat was real. That night, Maria stayed awake longer than usual. She walked the property with a lantern and checked every corner of the ranch. She made sure the horses were safe, the gates locked, and the stables secure. Her heartbeat was steady, but she felt a storm approaching. She sensed danger closer than ever. She went to bed late but could not sleep deeply. The sky outside her window was dark and quiet, but she felt as if something was moving beneath that silence. Then, in the middle of the night, the smell of smoke reached her. At first, she thought it was her imagination. But within seconds, the scent grew stronger and sharper. Her eyes flew open, and she sat up quickly. The smell was not faint, it was thick, burning, and alarming. Maria rushed to the window. Her heart dropped. A bright glow lit the ground near her barn. Flames flickered wildly in the darkness, rising higher each second. The fire spread fast, feeding on dry wood and hay. She ran outside without wasting a second. The heat hit her face immediately. The crackling sound of the fire filled the night. The horses inside the stables neighed loudly in fear. Maria covered her mouth with her sleeve and ran toward them. She managed to free the horses one by one, guiding them away from the fire. They ran into the open fields, scared but safe. Maria then tried to throw dirt and water on the flames, but the fire was too fierce. The dry season had made everything easier to burn. Within minutes, the fire leapt from one structure to another. Fences lit up like matchsticks. The wood stored near the barn caught fire suddenly. The flames grew taller, brighter, and louder. Maria fought as hard as she could, but she had no chance of stopping the blaze alone. The fire soon reached her house. Maria felt the heat sink into her skin. She stepped back, coughing, her eyes watering from the smoke. She watched helplessly as the flames climbed the walls of her home, the same home she had lived in since childhood. She wanted to run inside, to save something, anything, but she knew it was impossible. Entering a burning house would cost her life. All she could do was watch. The fire roared into the sky, lighting up the darkness around her ranch. The crackle of burning wood echoed in her ears. Slowly, painfully, her childhood home collapsed into glowing ashes. Her father's old workshop fell soon after. The land that once felt peaceful now looked like a battlefield. Maria stood there, her face lit by flames, her heart breaking quietly. She felt the weight of loss pressing heavily on her chest. She had lost the place that held every memory of her father. She had lost the land she had worked so hard to protect. She had lost the safety she once felt here. But inside that sadness, something else began to form. A new strength, a silent promise, a steady fire that did not burn the land but burned inside her. Those who did this thought they had destroyed her. They thought she would leave. They thought she would step aside. But Maria Dawson was raised by a U.S. Cavalry trainer, and she was not going to break. Maria stood on the blackened ground long after the fire died. The cold morning air carried the smell of smoke and ash. The sky above her was pale and silent, as if the world itself did not know what to say to her. Her home, her barn, her fences, everything she had worked for were now only piles of burned wood and broken pieces. She felt the heartbreak deeply, but she did not cry. Tears were not her way of showing pain. Instead, she breathed slowly, steadying her mind. She knew this was not the time to break. This was the time to think. Maria called the local authorities as soon as the sun rose. Officers arrived, looked at the damage, took notes, and asked questions. They were polite but vague. They told her they would investigate, but Maria could feel their hesitation. She knew they had bigger cases, more urgent matters, and limited resources. Without strong evidence, they could not do much. They promised to stay in touch, but she understood that she could not depend on them alone. When they left, she stood quietly on the ruined land. She looked at the footprints near the burned areas. The same heavy boot prints she had seen earlier. She saw tire marks from trucks. She even recognized a familiar pattern in the dirt that matched the vehicles she had seen near her fences. It was clear now. Those men had come back. They had threatened her. And when she refused to give up her land, they decided to destroy everything she had. Maria felt pain, yes. But the pain slowly changed into determination. Not anger, not revenge, just strength. the kind of strength her father had trained into her since childhood. She remembered his voice clearly, as if he was standing beside her. When someone tries to take away what you love, don't fear them. Understand them. Study them. Outsmart them. Maria took those words into her heart. She spent the first day after the fire making sure her horses were safe. They were frightened but unharmed. She led them to the far edge of the land where the fire had not reached. She gave them food, water, and comfort. Even though she was hurting, she did not let her emotions stop her from doing what needed to be done. Her father once told her that the first step in any challenge was to stabilize what you still have. She still had her horses. She still had her land. She still had her skills. The fire had taken much from her, but it had not taken her strength. After caring for the horses, Maria walked back toward the ruins of her home. She kneeled down and picked up a half-burned wooden box. Inside it were her father's old notebooks, training records, survival notes, tactical lessons he used during his years with the U.S. Cavalry. The edges were burned, the pages smoky, but they were still readable. She held the notebooks with gentle hands. They reminded her of evenings spent sitting at the dining table, watching her father write with deep focus. These notebooks were filled with wisdom lessons about discipline, observation, strategy, and responsibility. Maria carried the notebooks to the shade of a large tree where she used to sit as a child. She opened the first notebook and began reading. It felt like she was returning to an old teacher. She spent hours studying the pages, absorbing every word. Her father had written things like, "Always observe the ground. The earth does not lie. The wind carries sound. Listen before you move. Patterns reveal the truth. Nothing happens without leaving a mark. A strong rider reads the land better than he reads the map." As she read these notes, Maria felt her mind sharpening. She understood exactly what she needed to do. The men who burned her ranch thought she was powerless, but they had forgotten something important. Her father had trained her not only to ride horses, but to think like a soldier. She began by studying the tracks around her property. She walked slowly, carefully, tracing the footprints and tire marks. She used the sunlight to measure the length of the shadows left by the tracks. She compared footprints to estimate the number of people. She noticed how deep the marks were, which helped her understand the weight of the vehicles and how fast they had been moving. Every detail gave her small pieces of information. Maria followed the tracks along the fence line. She discovered that the men had entered her ranch from the western side, where the land dipped slightly and the fence was older and easier to break. She made mental notes of everything. Her father had taught her tracking like it was a language. Now she was reading that language fluently. The next morning, Maria woke early. Even without a house, she kept her routine. She washed her face in the cool stream, tied her hair back, and took Storm, her strongest horse, for a ride. She rode not for peace this time but to search for answers. For several hours, she followed the tracks beyond her property line. She found places where the ground was disturbed, where bushes had been crushed, and where small pieces of trash like bottle caps and torn fabric had been left behind. Each clue helped her piece together a direction. As she rode farther, she saw something unusual. A small patch of ground with heavy tire marks leading into the woods. It looked like a hidden path formed from repeated use. Maria guided Storm forward carefully. The narrow path twisted between trees until it opened into a clearing. There, she saw signs of activity, empty boxes, discarded tools, and traces of fuel smell. It was clear that someone had been using that area recently, possibly even the same men who destroyed her ranch. Maria examined everything but did not touch anything. Her father's notes reminded her, "A tracker leaves the world untouched." She simply observed, memorized, and analyzed. After an hour, she turned back toward her ranch. As she rode, she planned her next steps. She needed to prepare herself physically and mentally. She needed to be strong, focused, and ready for anything. Back home, Maria created a temporary shelter using leftover wood and tarp. She kept it simple, but it gave her a place to rest. She stored food and water close by. She moved her horses near a safer area and surrounded them with temporary fencing. Then she began training again. She practiced riding drills across open fields to sharpen her speed and control. She rode in tight circles, sudden stops, and quick turns, movements her father used to call horse discipline drills. She felt her confidence return with every ride. Next, she practiced rope techniques, throwing, pulling, tying things she had not focused on in years. Her hands remembered the motions. Her muscles remembered the strength. She swung the rope, looped targets, and strengthened her grip until her fingers tingled. She also practiced her endurance. She ran across the land, climbed small hills, and pushed herself to stay steady even when tired. She needed to be fast and strong if she wanted to face the challenges ahead. She read her father's notebooks every night. The more she read, the more she understood that she was not helpless. She had everything she needed: training, discipline, patience, and purpose. One evening, as she stood on the land and watched the distant horizon, she noticed something. Far off, in the same direction where she had followed the tracks, she saw faint movement lights glowing between the trees, small but noticeable. Her heart beat steadily. She now knew the location. She knew their habits. She knew their direction. The men who burned her ranch were not just wandering. They had a base nearby. They were operating quietly, thinking no one would discover them. But they did not know Maria. They did not know she had learned from a U.S. cavalry trainer. They did not know she had tracked them, using skills stronger than fear. They did not know she was preparing. Her strength wasn't about fighting. It was about strategy, understanding, and discipline. Maria made a quiet promise to herself as she looked toward those distant lights. She would find the truth. She would gather evidence. She would protect her land. And she would stop those who tried to break her. The fire had taken her home, but it had awakened her purpose. Part 4 will show how she uses her skills and intelligence to bring justice. Maria woke up before the first light touched the land. The sky was still dark, and the air was cool with the scent of early morning dew. She stood quietly near the stream, washing her face and letting the cold water wake her fully. Today felt different. It felt like the day her story would change. For days, she had trained, observed, tracked, and prepared herself. Now she knew exactly where the men were gathering. She had seen the lights far in the woods, watched their movements, and followed their tracks until she understood their routine. They were confident, thinking no one would notice them. But Maria had been watching closely, silently, like a shadow on her own land. She saddled Storm with careful hands. The horse sensed her seriousness and stood unusually still. Maria whispered into his ear, "Stay calm. Stay strong." Storm gently tapped the ground with his hoof as if agreeing with her. Maria did not plan to confront anyone directly. She knew she did not have numbers on her side. Instead, she wanted proof, clear evidence she could show to authorities. She wanted to expose whoever thought they could take her ranch through fear. Her father had always told her that the strongest plan was not the loudest one but the smartest one. She guided Storm across the quiet morning fields, following the path she had memorized. The sun was still below the horizon, painting the sky with pale silver light. Birds had not yet begun to sing. It was the perfect time to approach without drawing unwanted attention. As she neared the woods, she slowed Storm and eventually dismounted. She tied him to a tree where he could stay hidden and safe. Then she moved on foot, silently stepping over fallen branches and dry leaves, careful not to make any sound. Maria studied the ground like a trained tracker. Footprints, tire marks, and broken twigs all led in one direction. She followed them until she reached the clearing she had seen from a distance before. This time she saw it more clearly. Hidden among the trees were 3 trucks. Tools scattered around, fuel containers stacked neatly, and maps pinned on a wooden board. There were tents set up, too, suggesting that the men stayed there during the night. Maria slowly crouched behind thick bushes and watched. A few men were already awake, talking quietly. The tall man she had met earlier stood near the board, pointing at a map. She listened carefully. She could not hear every word, But she understood enough. They were discussing land, routes, and ways to expand their unofficial operations. It became clear that her ranch was only one part of what they wanted. They had plans involving much more land, and anyone who refused to cooperate became a problem to them. Maria felt a steady fire inside her, not anger, but purpose. She took out a small camera she had borrowed from a friend in town. She zoomed in carefully and captured photos of the trucks, the maps, the fuel containers, and the men. She took pictures of their faces, the equipment, the surroundings, and anything that looked illegal or suspicious. She saved each image, knowing this would be enough evidence to get the law involved. While she worked quietly, she heard the crack of a twig behind her. She froze. For a moment, she did not move at all. Her breath became shallow. Slowly, she turned her head just enough to see one of the men walking through the trees. He was looking for something, maybe checking the area before they started their day. Maria pressed herself deeper behind the bushes. The man walked closer, scanning the ground and stretching his arms as if waking up. Maria remembered her father's words. In moments of danger, the quiet mind sees the path. She stayed absolutely still. The man paused just a few steps away. Maria held her breath. After a few seconds, he turned around and walked back toward the clearing. Only then did she let out a slow breath. She waited another minute to be sure no one was coming. Then she took a few more photos, making sure she had everything she needed. Maria moved back slowly, retracing her steps with care. She returned to Storm, gently untied him, and rode back toward her ranch. She kept her speed steady but quiet. Her heartbeat remained calm, even though she had just escaped being discovered. When she reached her land, she dismounted and walked the rest of the way, letting the weight of the morning settle inside her. She knew she had done the hardest part. Now she just needed to take the evidence to the right people. She drove into town immediately and met with the local authorities. This time, when she presented her photos, their expressions changed from polite concern to serious focus. The images showed more than just trespassers. They suggested illegal activity, organized planning, and dangerous behavior. The officers thanked her for bringing the information and promised to take immediate action. They contacted higher authorities, who agreed to investigate the hidden camp. Maria felt a quiet sense of relief. She had done what she needed to do. She had protected her land with intelligence, not force, but her day was not over yet. When she returned to her ranch, she noticed something unexpected. A truck was parked near the edge of her property. It was not the same truck as before. It belonged to Mr. Turner, a kind older man who lived many miles away. He stepped out as soon as he saw her. "I heard about the fire," he said softly. "Came as soon as I could." Maria smiled gently. She had always known him as a quiet but respectful neighbor. He looked around at the burnt land with sadness in his eyes. "You didn't deserve this," he said. "No one does." Maria thanked him. Other neighbors began to arrive as well, people she rarely saw but who had heard what happened. Some brought tools, others brought food, and a few simply came to show support. Maria felt warmth in her heart. She had always lived quietly, never asking for help, but now people were standing with her voluntarily. For the first time since the fire, she felt she was not alone. Later that evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, Maria heard the distant sound of many engines, this time not from the men who caused trouble, but from law enforcement vehicles. They headed toward the woods with purpose. Maria watched from afar, standing silently beside Storm. The wind carried faint sounds of voices, commands, and movement. After a while, everything grew still again. The officers came back the next day and informed her that they had found the hidden camp. The men were taken into custody for questioning. They also found maps and documents that proved their plans, not only for her ranch, but for many other areas. Thanks to Maria's courage and evidence, the authorities were able to stop something much larger than just her fire. When the officers left, Maria turned her eyes to her land once more. It was still burned, still dark, and still wounded. But she felt hope rising inside her. She knew that healing would take time, just like it does after any injury. But she also knew she had the strength to rebuild. For the next several weeks, She worked tirelessly. She cleared the ashes, repaired the fences, and created new shelter for her horses. Her neighbors helped where they could, and Maria accepted their kindness with grateful humility. Every day, the ranch looked a little better. Storm, Willow, Luna, and Ranger stayed close to her, as if they understood that she needed their presence. She spent evenings brushing their coats and talking softly to them. Their gentle calmness eased her mind. She felt safe and whole with them. One morning, as she stood on a small hill overlooking her ranch, she saw new growth, green shoots breaking through the blackened soil. Nature was healing. The land was coming back to life. And so was she. Maria realized something important. The fire had taken her home, but it had not taken her courage. The danger had shaken her life, but it had also reminded her of her strength. She had faced fear without letting it control her. She had followed her father's teachings and used them wisely. She felt proud not because she had won, but because she had stayed true to herself. As a soft breeze passed through her hair, she whispered quietly, "Thank you, Papa." She knew he would be proud too. Maria Dawson rebuilt her ranch with patience and determination. And even though her life had been shaken, she found new confidence inside herself. She understood something she never realized before. Strength is not just about standing tall. It is about standing tall after being pushed down. The men had burned her ranch to the ground, but they had forgotten one thing. She was trained by a man who taught her how to rise again no matter what. And she did.